What's up, Greg?
Hello, welcome to today's episode of Juice and the Numbers, your movies and entertainment podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Tracy.
And I'm Corwin Heller.
And Corwin is trooping through this episode. I mean, really, what a stand-up guy. Might sound funky because I don't know if anyone follows the news. There was a large hurricane that ripped through the East Coast, and the Heller household is currently without power. So Corwin doing this from his phone through sheer force of strength to help us maintain a schedule. A round of applause to you, buddy.
Yeah, in my car right now at the end of a cul-de-sac that I do not live on, operating on limited battery, wearing a gaming headset to record this. So we're doing what we can to make it through this episode. If at some point I just cut out like I died, I, either had my phone die or tree power lines fell on me and I'm actually dead. So, you'll find out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, let's pray for the former. If anything should happen. All right, then let's to help save you from having to sit in this cul-de-sac for too long and to help preserve your phone battery, let's get rolling right on into this. Let's start with Big Fan. Let's start with Big Fan.
All right. I watched this last night. I actually watched it at a friend's house with their mom, and the mom came in right as they got to the strip club. So that was a really great movie watching experience for me. Have to admit. But
could have been worse.
Yeah.
Could have been the masturbation scene.
Oh, if you think they didn't also get to watch that, you are sorely mistaken, my friend.
Oh, glad to hear it. So Big Fan is a 2009 film written and directed by Robert Siegel, starring Patton Oswalt, Kevin Corrigan, and Michael Rappaport, about a hardcore New York Giants fan as he struggles to deal with the consequences when he is beaten up by his favorite player. It has no awards, nominations, nor wins of note. It had an estimated budget. Oh, estimated budget is not here, but it has a cumulative worldwide gross of about $234,000, which feels like a lot for this movie.
I looked it up and I saw that the estimated budget was $5 million. I have no idea if that's true. But, oh, man, I hope it wasn't. I really hope it wasn't.
The only place I could see that money is getting the rights to use NFL properties, like showing Giants Stadium, showing Giants logos and merch, and showing Eagles merch. That and maybe the strip club scene, but, that's it. Everything else is just backdrop.
Yeah. Getting, big superstar A-lister Michael Rappaport to show up for 30 seconds, speak a few lines.
Yeah, that's
that
really
probably cost a pretty penny. Man, casting him as a major asshole was a phenomenal decision.
It's the only character he does well every time. Corwin,
I feel like it's the only character he does.
Oh, well, it's the only one he can do.
Yeah, you know what? I got to be brief with this. I felt like this was a huge missed opportunity. The premise, I actually really, really liked. The idea of, spreading this message or being in the situation where a diehard fandom, comes before the ability to almost think critically or, putting an athlete or a uniform, a team in front of your best interests, in front of, what is necessarily justice. I'm a Penn State fan. I know exactly what it's like to have rabid diehard fans just be completely without reason when it comes to major, how should I put this? Scandals. You could call this a scandal. So I really do, on a personal level, I'm able to appreciate the message they were trying to convey. I just think it completely fell flat with execution. Just watching the movie, it wasn't it wasn't an enjoyable film to watch, through and through. They had some really tremendous scenes that, we can talk about. They had, some really great characters. But man, it felt like it was just a handful of good scenes back and forth that just didn't necessarily have the right direction to make a huge difference.
Okay. I like this movie. I have weird feelings about the ending. We'll get to it. But in general, I really like the idea of this film, and I think it's executed fairly well. I don't think it's groundbreaking by any means, but for a sports fan, I definitely sympathize greatly with the movie.
Oh yeah.
You got this guy whose life sucks. His job sucks. His house situation sucks. Lives with his mother. His friendships kind of suck. Kevin Corrigan seems like a good friend to him, but like it's all he's got, and they're both kind of in the same boat. His brother sucks, and the fact that his brother's life is going better than his sucks. Like everything sucks, but he's got the Giants, and he pours so much energy and devotion and emotion into it. I mean, like he's sitting there and he's writing out all the things he wants to say on these sports call-in shows that he does, and it's so like you love to see that level of devotion, and it's encouraging because like here's a guy who's clearly like, not super understanding of social cues, because why else would you be writing these things down, or why else would you have the entire strip club scene where he gets beat up by his favorite football player that is the catalyst of this film? But it's also like kind of a little sad. Like he's scripting out what he's going to say on a radio talk show as if it matters, and it doesn't. But that's the thing about sports. It's your escape for a lot of people. You and I, Corwin, follow it because we grew up with it. It means a lot to us, and we're enraptured in the storylines and the stats. And I'd like to think both of us have separation from it to a degree. But here's a guy who doesn't, who chose not to litigate on a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that could have changed his life, in place of letting this guy that fucked him up, right or wrong, gray area, because he's an impact player for his favorite football team. It's, I don't know. I find this to be just such an interesting topic. It's also tough because the bar for indie films is a little bit different. Because they're usually not highest quality cinema. But I don't know. I don't know if it hit close to home in some odd way or what, but I enjoyed this.
I mean, you know me, like I'm always one to really look at and dissect like the technical aspect of it, like the cinematography most of all. In this, it was incredibly washed out. The color palette, the lighting, like the way they shot it, it was weird and uncomfortably shot to the point where it's like this. Like I know this is an indie film through and through, but this is like and some
this
college
is from
level. Like,
this is from 2009 when like indie films were first really entering like the mainstream, and like every son of a bitch with Premiere Pro just slapped a filter on it and called it a day. I swear to you, every single indie film that came out around when this film did all had the same cinematographer. They all look exactly like this. It's fucking weird.
Yeah. And just like the shot selection, everything. I get that this could be an artistic choice. They want to make the viewer feel uncomfortable, but it was super tight, super jarring at times. Just like how close the camera was to the characters. And again, if it's an artistic choice, I get that. I can understand why. This guy doesn't live a comfortable life. You shouldn't feel comfortable watching him live his. but at the same time, it does detract from my experience watching this. It's similar in the way that Uncut Gems is shot, where it's like visually keeping you on edge, but without the tension, without the quality of the cinematography to make up for it and make it a pleasant viewing experience. So that was something I noticed quickly and very much was a detractor for this all around. Yeah.
All right, so let's get into the plot a little bit. So basically,
Okay.
Patton Oswalt, big Giants fan, spots one of his favorite players just like on Staten Island, just there for like no reason. Follows him to Stapleton, which is not a good part of Staten Island. It's I'm pretty sure it's from. It's an area where some of the members of the Wu-Tang Clan are from. It's not a good place. And they thought that's weird, and then followed him to a strip club in Manhattan, where he like brought up the fact he saw him in Stapleton, and it's just like, and the guy was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then proceeds to beat the shit out of him. Which, believe it or not, whether it would happen, I don't think that would happen, because I think NFL players are smart enough to be like, "Hey, posse, get this guy the fuck away from me." But whatever. And then after he gets beat up, he goes to the hospital, and the police come, and he pretends not to be a reliable source of information to protect this player who's a big impact player for the Giants. Corwin, would you protect not just your favorite player who's also a huge impact player for the Steelers or Penn State? You're a bigger Penn State fan. In the midst of a playoff push.
It's tough because you definitely have to think like, shit, would I do this while you're watching the movie? And man, it's tough. Like, this would be like TJ Watt beating the shit out of me in a club after I stalked him all night and watched him buy drugs. And it's like, man, if the Steelers lose TJ Watt, that's kind of, our defense is kind of shit in the bed this year. Like, that's kind of just the way it is. Like, he's a keystone player for the team. But if I get the ever-loving shit beaten out of me to the point where I'm unconscious for 3 days in the hospital, yeah, he's paying me a lot of money. Like, at the end of the day, like, obviously he's in a situation where the Jets are more important to him the Giants, are more important to him in his life than like the Steelers or Penn State football is to mine. But it's really hard to even put yourself in his shoes and not choose to have a comfortable, set life for the rest of your life, rather than maybe they make the playoffs, maybe they win a Super Bowl, maybe this, maybe that, maybe whatever. There's too many uncertainties that go along with just choosing not to press charges against a player. It's tough. And besides, maybe he has a giant contract. Maybe him getting put on the commissioner's exempt list and being sent to prison. Maybe that clears up some cap space, allows them to sign some free agents. You never know. There's so much going on. I don't think I could ever pass up, $77 million.
It's a thing. It's like, I don't think 99% of sports fans would say, yeah, I'd protect my favorite player through this. I think most of us would be like, I love Luis Severino of the Yankees, even though he hasn't pitched in like 2 years. All right, I'll pick a different guy. I love Aaron Hicks on the Yankees, or Aaron Judge on the Yankees. If they beat the shit out of me, that lawsuit would be colossal and immediate. Like, you have to separate my team winning from reality. I think this film does a relatively good job of showing you that this man is incapable of doing that, for both for personal, emotional, and psychological reasons. He is just unhealthily attached to this sport and team. but God, no, fuck that. Absolutely not. Like, oh, no. If Chad Pennington came to my house and like punched me in the face, I would sue Chad Pennington for $1 billion
Listen,
immediately.
you could like give me the option of, hey, your team will definitively win a Super Bowl this season. No, if, ands, or buts. They take home the Lombardi Trophy. They take home the Crystal Ball Trophy, win the national championship. Or we give you $77 million in cash. Yeah, that's not a choice.
There's always next year.
Sports are great and as an escape. You know what's even better than an escape? Being able to do whatever the fuck you want because you have $77 million.
To the average American, $77 million is some serious fuck you money. It might not be a lot if you're like Jeff Bezos, but hey, $77 million to the average person, that's fuck you money.
You can buy a football league. You can buy the XFL for $15 million and still have $62 million left over.
This is a true fact. Just ask Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Own it.
I think the most wasted scene appears eventually later on in the film, where Patton Oswalt shows no real deterrent from or inclination to change his opinion that he's not going to rat out. I forgot what this made up player's name is. QB was his initials. And then he calls
Quintel.
I don't even remember, man. It's Bingham. I don't know. But he calls
Chandler Bing. That's it.
Chandler Bong. He calls the detective on the case down to a cafe or a bagel shop, whatever it was, just to tell him, yeah, I still don't know anything. And the cop was like, why did you call me down here? This could have been a fucking phone call. And as a viewer of the scene, the only thing I could think of was like, yeah, this fucking stupid. Why did I watch you do this? No new information was presented here.
I fully took, throughout the film, he seems torn whether or not he wants to file this conflict that he has. I totally, expected him to toss and turn the way he did, but it was like, wow, the way he presented that, you could have been like, I thought I could have, but at the end of the day, I just can't trust my memory, whatever. He was just like, yeah, fuck it, you're on your own, pal.
Anyway, all right, we'll just keep going. Yeah, I think the writer of the film likes the idea of twists, but didn't really put enough thought into how to pull off the twists. Because I think that scene, he's been stressing the decision, tossing and turning on it. And so you go into it thinking, oh, he called the cop down because he's finally going to come to his senses and rat on the guy, or at least, give information to the cops. And then it's like, no, he doesn't. He just wastes the cops' time for no good reason. And then this basically is going to bring us to the end of the film where the cop is, or the Patton Oswalt. And this is why I'm conflicted, because I think it's a cool ending in the way that it in what ends up happening. I think it's a fun ending. I'll put it that way. But I don't think it makes any sense with the script, because the film basically just abandons the whole plot line that is, you got beat up by this guy and now the cops want you to tell on him and you're not going to, and instead goes towards, don't you just hate Philadelphia Phil? You should go shoot him with a paintball gun. And then he drives down to Philadelphia, somehow finds the bar that Philadelphia Phil frequents, and befriends him, and then shoots him with blue and red paintball pellets in a bathroom, Giants colors, and then runs away and gets arrested at the end of the movie. And while I enjoyed that, I enjoyed watching the sequence, wow, did it really just come out of fucking nowhere? Yeah.
Oh, man, that just did not make any actual sense to what the rest of the movie was about. And it was just wow, the whole lead up to that, every aspect of it makes you think, oh, they show you the gun, they show him go into the bar, everything involved. It's like, okay, this is what he's going to do. And then it's like, oh, paintball gun, this, that. And it's just like, really? Like, the whole lead up, like, it makes so much sense. Like, this guy is clearly in a very precarious mental state. Throughout the whole movie, he has breakdown after breakdown. It would make so much sense for, like, this to be, like, the emotional jerk to, like, seal the theme and the message of the movie. And then it's happens the way it happens with the paintball and running from the cops and getting arrested, and it's just like, man, I just don't feel bad for him anymore. I like this guy is just plain old fucking stupid. Like,
What's weird about it is like, it's like the writer didn't want to go for the full dark ending, because if he had straight up killed him, you'd go, oh yeah, like this guy was just dealing with so much, he had a psychotic break. But he had to go find a paintball gun that looked convincingly like a handgun. He had to find blue and red paint pellets. And again, I enjoyed watching it because it's like a kooky thing to happen, and I think it was well shot. But it's also like, it's just so out of place. And don't get me wrong, obviously Philadelphia Phil was being a dick. That is certainly understandable. But in the scope of the film and what it's looking at, it doesn't relate to anything else.
Mm-hmm. And that just goes back to the point of like, man, this could have been really great. This had a really great premise, really great bones, and it just didn't execute for me.
Yeah. All right. Let's leave it there then. Give me a rating and a review.
I do want to say I am sounding a lot like I didn't like it. It had some tremendous lines and little details that like were written in, and it's like, wow, that is hilarious. Like a 7-year-old's birthday party where the cake is fucking 50 cent, and it's like that
was
is
hilarious.
So Staten Island. The mom essentially.
Oh, this movie is aggressively Staten Island.
Oh yeah. Driving through like the ghetto, and it's like, wow, maybe they're here to see the Wu-Tang. Lost it. 10:45 on the clock. Oh, it's a little late to be first heading out. Just like they do a really good job of like building the characters in this movie through these like very subtle, simple lines of dialogue. And that's what I think this does really well. It's just, the rest of it. Oh, also, we gave up 41 points to the Chiefs. And listening to that in 2020, it's like, holy shit, they only gave up 41 points to the Chiefs? That's awesome. Very different. But yeah, that's
I'd also like to offer up the line, can I borrow your internet?
And then just Googling.
Followed by a hilarious Google search. Yeah. Googled the word lawsuit.
Try stop lawsuit. Maybe that the lawyers just don't want you to know how to do it. It's like,
yeah, truly.
Man. But yeah, I mean, I feel like again, like there's not a lot to dig deep into here. Really great message, some good writing, some good character building throughout. Great premise. Just I wish this was a more of a major motion picture. Like if an A24 did this, or one of a larger studio, this could have been something really, really cool. But I got to give it a 2. Just looking at other ratings, how I like ended up feeling by the end of watching it, I can't give it more than a 2.
Hey, I don't think you're off base in the slightest. I'm only going to give it a 2.5, just because like there's obvious and clear problems with this film. However, I still liked watching it. And to me, like that warrants it being a middle of the road film. Like I don't think anyone's gonna regret watching this. It's not long.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like bad. It's got an interesting plot. Patton Oswalt's super good in it. But it's like there's a lot of problems with it. There's holes. There's issues. So yeah, I think this is a very middle of the road is what it is film. So, all right.
You ready?
Shall we move on to La Haine?
I am very much ready to discuss La Haine.
All right. La Haine is I always say it too Jewish, is a 1995 French film written and directed by Matthew Kassovitz. I want to say Kassovitz. Starring Vincent Cassel, Hubert Koundé, and Saeed Tagmaoui. It has no major award nominations nor wins. It has, do we have an estimated budget? Yes, 2.6 million euros, and it has a cumulative worldwide gross of $281,000. So,
what?
I don't know what the conversion rate was at the time because euros have gone through quite the shift over the last 30 years, 25 years. So it's a kind of an awkward transition, but makes sense. French films, in general, international films don't do as well at box office as American films do, is what it is. It's 24 hours in the lives of three young men in the French suburbs. I would not call them in the suburbs. The day after a violent riot. They are definitely in the projects.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
major
Corwin,
aspect of this film is the fact that they do not live.
Yeah, that's like yeah, it's like the main point of the film is the fact that they very much so live in the projects where the riots are taking place. Anyway, Corwin, what did you think of this film?
Oh man, immediately jumping into it, I was a little caught off guard with, obviously I knew this was a French film, had subtitles, and it was going to be in black and white. But the speed in which the dialogue went, it was very hard to really dig in and both follow it, visually and, narratively, just because the dialogue was moving so fast. Maybe it's just, I wasn't completely focused on it. It didn't have me, locked in. I was just having a real tough time, following along with everything. Had to go back a couple times. And I was really nervous about like, damn, like this is kind of it. Like I'm not going to be able to enjoy this movie. Like this is tough. Like this is not looking great. But the second it just gets into the nitty gritty, like the girth of this movie, it just is so powerful. It's so strong. The connection that each one of these guys have, the friendship between the three of them, the connection that this film has to what's going on today, very, very much relatable to, the world that we're living in now. And God, it felt like my enjoyment and connection to this movie just grew exponentially the longer I watched it. I ended up loving this film. And just everything was just so well done. So, every little detail was, it added something to the story. And I love this film.
Yeah, I think this is so beautifully done. Everything felt natural. And what I love about films that feel natural is that they are done so intentionally. I understand some filmmakers like to go with like the non-actor route or more improvisation to feel natural. I don't think this really had any. This felt very scripted, which is great, because the more detail you can add into it, in the workings of it, I think the more natural it will feel coming out because you have better idea and concept for what you're looking for when the actors actually go into their roles. I think this was incredibly well done. I think the storyline was minimal in what it was getting at, but came at it from so many different angles and repeated so many ideas, but in different ways, that it really kept you intrigued and captivated the entire way through it, even though, again, the main scope of the film really was pretty narrow, which, again, I just love so much. So if I could give a brief summary of kind of what happens here is there's riots going on. I'm not sure they ever really said why. I'm not sure. I don't think it matters. I'm actually going to go ahead and say it doesn't matter. But did they ever say why there were riots, or just that there were?
I actually didn't. I meant to look into it. I wanted to look into it while I was watching. I ended up being, I'll hold off until I'm done watching. Don't want to interrupt. But I do not know.
All right. Yeah. Again, I don't think it matters. I was just wondering if I had missed it. And again, because this is Europe, it's a little bit. It's very different watching it as an American because the idea that there's like a singular loose gun and that's a big deal is kind of preposterous to an American audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like I have in my notes like the fact that there's like been several news stories about a single missing police firearm as an American is like startling. Like no one that wouldn't crack the fucking 7th to 12th pages of the news here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal, which ain't a good thing, but is the reality.
Oh yeah. And if I saw that on the news, I'd be like, only one?
Yeah, same. And anyway, it turns out one of the main characters had found the gun and is claiming that he is looking to, or would, hypothetically, shoot a police officer should their friend that was put into a coma as a result of police brutality during the protesting riots, whatever they were, die in the hospital. And then it kind of navigates these three guys going about what seems like a relatively normal day for them, but constantly circling back to these ideas of, I guess, identity, violence that is justified versus unjustified, what it means to be like a person. Yeah, I guess that those are kind of like the main things I'm trying to grapple at. What did you think?
Just the whole aspect of, the big thing that jumped out for me was, the inter conflict between these three guys about, how each of them was dealing with not only the stress of, living in this aspect of society, this part of society where, police are cracking down in force, pulling people and detaining them off the street, seemingly at random with no probable cause, by guys not even in uniform. Like, obviously that connects to what's going on right now, but, having to live in that part of, part of Paris, part of this time in history is critical. On top of that, one of your closest friends being in the hospital because of that, ensuing violence, there's a lot of conflict going on between the three of them and the society, man versus society and all that. And watching how each of them handle that, some obviously better than others, was, I thought that was incredibly interesting to both follow and understand more and more as the film went through. And that's really what I focused on throughout.
I think my main focus going through this was how Vince and Hubert. I know it's like Hubert, but I feel pretentious and awkward saying that every time, so I'm just going to keep going with Hubert. Hooby dooby doo. How those two manifested their emotions throughout the film, because they had two very different reactions over the course of their conversations and to the events that they met in general. Vince, very loud, very angry, very aggressive, and ultimately leading to very little action. Whereas Hubie, constantly far more level-headed, a lot more somber, a lot more practical, and would oftentimes come to more of a resolution, or at least come to more action, which we certainly see at the end.
Wow, that ending.
And I think that's what this, yeah, and I think that's most of what this film is really trying to show is just these different types of reactions to what are very common problems in all types of societies. These, one of my notes is just how contemporary these conversations and news stories feel 25 years later. You know, like one of the main problems that this part of Paris is having is that they're beating up the police are beating up minorities in the streets. Seems kind of familiar. You know, like we're having this problem right fucking now. And there's an very early reference, Vince in the mirror doing a taxi driver impression. But it's so relevant to what's happening in the film because the whole premise of Taxi Driver, despite, you know, leaving aside the loose mental state of the Robert De Niro character, is that he thinks he's going to clean up the streets via vigilante justice, basically. He thinks he's going to wash out the dredges of society, but he's not looking at it from the pimps and the hookers. He's looking at it from the police. He thinks that they're the problem, and he's going to Robert De Niro Taxi Driver them out of existence. And then ultimately, he doesn't do anything because the anger is just a facade. It's just, maybe not a facade, because it's not fake. It's just doing. The actual doing is what's hard. And all the anger in the world isn't necessarily going to get you there.
Oh, God, those two characters, you know, as much as it's the three of them, you know, Saeed always seems to take he's the middleman and everything. You know, Hubert and, you know, Vince are clearly the two not polar opposite, but the two ends of the spectrum that it's constantly, you know, going back and forth between. And just the connection between those two and just the way they both handle situations is just constantly this like pulling force that I love to see. You know, Vin's basically, you know, how he handles himself, his emotions, you know, the way he reacts to the situations he's in. Like I can't help but physically share his anger towards, you know, the society he's living in. You know, again, unmarked police roaming and pulling people off the streets, beating them to the point of hospitalization. And, you know, Hubert is, you know, he knows he's a small fish in a big sea. And at the end of the day, he knows that he's the only person who is looking out and can take care of himself personally. And then Vince knows that the only way you can handle yourself as a group, as a society, is like standing up to this oppression. And just having both of these viewpoints essentially culminating in that, you know, that final scene, that final shot that, you know, we'll get to. It's just, God, I loved it. You know, it was amazing to watch.
Now there's a lot to digest with this. I mean, really, there's so much. It's another one of those films that's it's just rife with things we could talk about that we're obviously going to have to abbreviate a lot of. One, for interest of how long these podcasts usually are, and for another, because Corwin is in a very uncomfortable recording situation, and we're not trying to make it more uncomfortable by chewing through his phone battery. But so let's pick out a few. I want to talk briefly about the Gawalski story,
Yes.
From the old man in the bathroom.
Yes.
And basically this old guy came out from a stall while they were arguing about, what were they arguing about at the time?
Principle. Something like that.
The principle of the money? Of Saeed getting the money?
No, it was like,
or were they talking about killing of the
I
police?
think it was that point they were talking about like killing police. I don't know specifically.
It's a thing that a lot of the conversations kind of kept coming back into the fray. So it's a little bit tough looking back to kind of remember what, when, and where these conversations were. Regardless, they were making one of their points, and this old guy comes out of the bathroom and he tells the story about when him and the people he lived with all got rounded up by the Nazis and got put on the trains, and the train stopped, and this one really shy dude, Kowalski, that everyone they was just so afraid to like shower with the guys and go to the bathroom with the guys, even though that they had no choice but to do it in a group. Got out, went behind the train cart to take a shit, but the train started pulling out while he was still out there. And he kept trying to run while holding his pants up. And every time he reached out to take a hand, his pants fell down and he couldn't run anymore. And he had to keep picking his pants up. And it's a funny story. And then at the end of it, Vince asked, like, what happened to him? And this old man was like, he never made it on the train. And then it was the dead of winter and he froze to death.
Yeah.
And that was how it ended. And what did you make of that story?
So,
what was the point you think the old guy was trying to make?
So at the time when he tells the story, like that point of the film, watching it for the first time, it was immediately like, I have no idea. I know I have no idea. I have a feeling by the end of this, there'll be some clarity, some exposition or something that will enlighten me on the point of that. And by the end, you see them miss and run after a train at the dead of night or the dead of winter, middle of the night. And Vince is there to meet them. He leaves before them. He gets away from the police. He has every right. He makes it back to where they're from, but he comes back to be with them, to support them. And it's like, okay, I get it. Like, you don't abandon your friends, when they need that help, when they need that support, when the alternative to helping them is them being on their own and forced to face the reality of the world. And so I took it as, okay, this is how you get across that Vince isn't going to leave his friends behind. That, as much as he has this strong opinion and principles that he claims to have, that he claims to be able to, support over anything else, it's still those three guys together that, comes before anything else. And he's not going to let them face that reality alone. So that's what I got from it.
I like that. I too had to sit with it for a little while because again, the movie has as you said, this movie has a lot of dialogue, and it kept moving expeditiously after this. I would think he's mostly addressing Vince here with his story, and again, which would make sense given the ending, which I guess I'll have to spoil a little bit to make my point. Although again, this movie is 25 years old. If I'm spoiling this ending for you, and we told you about a week in advance, I'm spoiling this ending for you. You got no blame but yourself. This guy who's got rounded up died because he couldn't let go of his feeling of embarrassment. He even given the circumstances, he just couldn't let it go. And even at the end, he couldn't literally let go of his pants just to be able to make it onto the train, just to keep going forward and eventually live possibly as this old man did. And that's Vince with his anger. He couldn't let it go. Not that he needed to let it go, but that it was going to destroy him if he didn't find a productive way of moving forward. And eventually it did. He didn't let his anger towards the police over what they did to Abdel. And again, I'm not saying he had to forget about it entirely, but he was letting it control him and guide his actions the way that this guy, this Kowalski or whatever his name was, did. And at the end of the movie, it killed Vince, just like it killed Kowalski. And in the story, Kowalski is going to the gulag. Like, he's not going to a good place. He's not going to somewhere nice. They're not escaping. They're going to the gulags. Like, it's a bad time. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not like Vince had to be all cheery and good with the cops, but letting go, moving forward to continue your fight in a different space, as long as it is forward moving, I think has a lot of value. And I think that's what this old guy was trying to get at with it, is you have to keep fighting. You can't get stuck. And Vince and Kowalski both got stuck because they couldn't. I feel like I said let go 10,000 times, but they couldn't let go.
I like that. I like that synopsis. I feel like it's easily one of those wackadoo stories that, with very little context that it's given, is something that could easily be perceived, 100 different ways. But I like that.
Oh, very much so. Well, thanks, buddy. I'm trying to pick out a few more main points. Oh, there was one I wanted to make that was right around there when they were going to go visit Asterix, which is like, so they're in a nicer part of Paris, they're in a nicer part of town, and they had this one line: "The police are nice around here." And God damn it, if that doesn't show you class divide via policing, I mean, my God, like the fact that they come from a shittier part of town and are therefore significantly more harshly scrutinized by the police than they would be. And granted, they were stopped by the cops, but because Vince caused a ruckus, is separate. But the fact that like they had the ability to recognize pretty immediately that the police in the wealthier part of town were kinder and more friendly than the police in their town is a pretty damning comment. I think it was Saeed who even said that the police called him sir. Like, that there you go. Class divide, implicit bias, right fucking there, man.
It's it's been 35 years since this came out. 25 years. Yes,
25.
math is good. Can you say anything has changed?
Not here.
No, absolutely not here. And it's one of those things where maybe if we watched this 2-3 years ago, before, you and I are both white guys who grew up in middle class New Jersey, in a fairly affluent area compared to large, swaths of the country. I don't think this would have had the same resonating effect if we watched it in 2016, 2017 as us watching it in 2020. We're both progressive people with progressive ideas, and it hasn't really been different those past couple of years, but seeing just the disparity between the lives we live and the way other people in this country live, and just how widespread this kind of oppression is, it hits hard right now. It hits incredibly hard, especially seeing this for the first time. Yeah.
And it's a much more minor point, and we don't have to really talk much about it at all. But also the fact that these three guys, they're all minority groups. We have a black man, we have a Muslim person, we have a Jewish person, and they all seem like relatively normal guys.
Yeah.
And then they go visit Asterix, who's living in a very affluent town and is a fucking whack job. But he's a regular fucking white dude.
That's how I imagine every person that does coke regularly lives. That's that lifestyle,
Yeah, who again picks another Robert De Niro film to emulate there with the whole deer hunter thing. But again, I think it's a minor sticking point, but the idea of racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism also on display in the film was a nice subtle touch to go along with the class divide moment that we had there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to get to before the ending. Is there anything else that you can think of that sticks out to you before we get into the ending?
A couple things, the dolly zoom.
Let's hear
when
'em.
they're, I think it was in front of the Eiffel Tower, but they're at the train station. I always love seeing that. Those kind of shots are relatively rare. There's actually a couple unique shots in this that I really like. The dolly zoom. There was a split diopter shot, not like a true one where it's a single frame being shot with two different focal points. But it was when Vince and his friends were leaving the fight and they go and shoot the bouncer. And Vince is, staring at what it's really like to come back, stand up, and essentially use that kind of violence to shoot someone that you feel was oppressing you, regardless of, the extent to which they were doing so. Obviously, the police in this scenario it's significantly more heavy-handed than a bouncer not letting guys into a club, but at the same time, he's still facing that reality. Directly before it ends up getting to that climactic point of him and another police officer. Um, I really like those unique shots that you don't see every day. The one of them leaving Snoopy's apartment, coming down that spiral staircase, just a vertical shot looking right up at them as they're kind of returning to the lower levels of society, coming down that staircase. Nothing special about it, just a really cool perspective, symbolic shot. Um, yeah, yeah. Them talking about
The cinematography, like these shots are all
oh,
exceedingly impactful.
love them.
They're beautifully fucking
Mhm.
done, and add so much, especially since this is a black and white film. You get, I think you just get so much more out of these creative shots than you would with color. Just because you have so much less to focus on. I think it was such a great idea. It's so well done.
I disagree. I do not enjoy films that choose to be in black and white versus color. Like, obviously, films, the Charlie Chaplin movie we just watched, older films where it was black and white because that's what you had. Films like Raging Bull, La Haine, I would rather see the color. I'd rather feel like this is a current reality rather than being forced to watch something in black and white where it feels like it is purposefully aging itself when there shouldn't be that need in this scenario. I understand that it's not something I would hold against the film. That's just my personal preference. I know you
Okay.
disagree. I'm just saying. That's throwing that
I
out
do.
there.
Anyway, any other scenes or shots you want to talk about before we get into the ending?
Them discussing the principle, like the principle of wanting to get that $100 back from Snoopy. That's the whole reason they went into the upper echelons of society, or upper echelons of Paris. Into the city. That's what it was all about, and that's what this whole film is about. It's about the principles of these three guys. What they value, their moral standing, all of that. I thought that was a really cool choice of dialogue, and just a little snippet that meant a lot towards the overall narrative of it. And then just something I really liked was them sitting on the roof at the end of the night singing OPP by Naughty by Nature, except with the French subtitles, it was OCB. And I was like, that means nothing, but I love that, especially when it's another split diopter shot, a real one of, them rolling a J with the Eiffel Tower far in the background, but also perfectly in focus. I just loved it so much.
I'm loving this. You got any more?
Nope, that's it.
All right, so then shall we get into the ending?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so at the end of as we said, one of the main points of this film is that there's a gun missing from a police officer. Vince has it. He's been threatening to use it on cops all day long, greatly exaggerating his willingness to use it on the police, but nonetheless making those claims. There's a very aggressive scene involving skinheads where Hubert starts kind of like egging him on to actually do it because he knows that Vince won't, and he's trying to show Vince that he's not going to, and that he should come to his senses and stop so much with the instigation. And so finally, at the end of the film, Vince gives up the gun to Hubert. He realizes he's not going to be doing anything, and he's starting to really come around or starting to get a little bit more level headed about things. Walking away with Saeed, and they get stuck up by a cop. And the cops have been shown to be very aggressive in the film, and he points a gun at Vince's head and was kind of, I think, trying to shake him down a little bit, trying to show him how big his dick is by look, I got a gun, stupid fucking idiot. And accidentally shoots Vince in the head and kills him. And at that point, Hubert like storms over, holds Vince for a moment. The cop's in shock, and then Vince points his gun at the cop's head. The cop points his gun at Hubert points his points his gun at the cop's head. The cop points his gun at Hubert's head. Saeed is just watching this happen because he's powerless in the situation, and the film cuts to black.
So it cuts to black, but not right before you see two gun flashes and hear two gunshots.
Yes, sorry, I missed that. Yes.
And that is just, you don't see it. If it cuts to black, before then, it leaves a little more to the imagination. The movie ends, you are left to sit and think and just, look back on, the 2 hours you just spent watching. But there's always that hope that, that's Schrodinger's cat where, like, if you don't open the box, you don't know whether the cat's alive or dead. You don't see it. You don't hear the gunshot. You don't know. They don't let you get off that easy.
Real quick, it was only a single gunshot, not two gunshots, just one.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Did you are you going back to look? Because I could have sworn it was two distinct flashes.
Nope, one.
All right, well, there goes my point. That, yeah. Still, leaves a lot up to the imagination, but, there was some culminating climax. And boy, I did not see it coming from a mile away. Not even close. I couldn't see it from 2 feet away. That's how you do a twist.
Yeah. In direct contrast to Big Fan. So really, the two situations we're presented with is the cop kills Hubert, doubling down on his murder spree at this point, which will ultimately just add Hubert to a big old list of names of people who got killed during these riots at the hands of police, probably unneeded deaths at the hands of the police, unwarranted, leaving really a big question of what came about of all of these guys' conversations and efforts when Saeed will be the only one left standing. Should he be left standing? Or Hubert kills the cop and succumbs to all the pressures that Vince had been touting throughout the entire film. And not even necessarily that I would disagree with Hubert's actions here, because we as a human being are emotional, and I don't think seeing your friend be murdered is a pretty decent reason to act in rage. Not saying blind killing is wrong, but it's certainly the more readily defensible position of the two. I don't know which do you think is the more likely outcome for our boys here.
Yeah, it's really, now knowing that it wasn't the twin gunshots, having to look back and think how I would feel about which outcome it would be. I am probably more torn than I should be about which I would prefer. On one hand, Hubert, such a tremendous character, him, having to surrender his morals in the name of saving, his friend, getting justice for a friend that was killed, everything that Vince was fighting about the entire film. It's hard to see someone, give up on their moral standing, but at the same time, the alternative is him dying. So obviously, I have to hope that Hubert was the one to pull the trigger. I can't say, I'd really have to go back and watch it again and really dig in to see if no, because I support, the reasoning of changing your morals to support that level of justice. And oh god, it's the way I entered this movie with just being, like, oh god, no, this is gonna be a tough watch. Like this is gonna be a hard 2 hours to get through, and just finishing it, and it's just like I need to watch more. Like I need to know more. Like I want more of this.
Need
God,
at
I love
least
this
two
so
more
much.
minutes.
I
Need at
know.
least 2 more minutes of movie.
Yeah,
uh,
man. Any
it's
final thought? It's
I'll leave my thoughts with this film. I think does a phenomenal job of giving you a complete and thorough backdrop for what a lot of these problems look like, coming from three very different perspectives. You know, Hubert is a former service member. He was in the Navy. He's a small business owner. He runs a gym that was collateral damage in the riots by getting burned down. He's clearly a person trying to do right by himself and trying not to cause trouble within society, but also understanding that he has to get by. He has to live. That's why he sells drugs. That's a minor part of the film. It's clearly not something he's like raring to do, but it's that he does because he has to support himself, and he has to do what he can just to make it in the part of the world and circumstances he's been dealt. Um, it offers great examples of storytelling and great nuance into the fact that these are just fucking people. They're complicated
mhm.
people, but like these are just fucking people. You know, these are just dudes trying to eat hot dogs on the roof, man. Like these are just guys that have been thrust into these situations, being no better or worse equipped to handle it than anybody else, and it
Yeah.
leads to a lot of irrational action and a lot of constant doubt and thought and worry and concern and second guessing and anger and sadness, because these are just people who didn't ask to have their friend killed by the police. Again, warranted or not, doesn't particularly matter, but still have to grapple with that in some kind of way. And you get to experience it with them. And it's a very interesting insight into that. I love it. Since I'm going already, I'll give my rating first. I'm gonna give it. A 4.5. There, that's where I settle in.
Oh man, this film, the cinematography we talked about is A plus plus. We didn't talk about it, but the sound, the music choices was beautiful. Very fitting for the time. Something I really enjoyed, and it stuck out to me. The symbolism throughout the film was, fantastic, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful all the way through for all three of those. It's just a powerful bond that builds between these three friends that just struggle how to cope with, the death of a friend caused by, the oppression and injustices of their society. We've watched three straight films now that lean heavily on symbolism. This is by far the best of all of them. Self-contained, easy to understand, beautifully written story, beautiful film all around. I give this a 4.5 out of 5. Excuse me.
All right, cool. We're in the same boat here. So for next week's
Did you
film,
give it a 4.5 too?
yes, sir. Yes, I
Nice.
did. Are we? Am I picking a number again for us to determine your next movie?
Not this week. I have one that I want to watch, and so I'm just gonna pick it. I'm gonna go
Let's
with
hear it.
Frost Nixon.
Oh, all right. Okay, I'm game. Feels very apt after the Trump Axios interview. Loving it. All right. My film choice this week, I wrote it down. Oh, it's 8.5. Federico Fellini's 8.5. So we
Okay,
have
haven't seen it.
Frost Nixon and 8.5. Oh, you're gonna hate it. I can't wait.
Oh, jeez. Why do you pick these movies? Ugh.
Because this is a classic. Of course I do.
Yeah,
Why else would I do it? This isn't even like a Josh classic. This is like it won 2 Oscars, and was nominated for a bunch at a time when foreign films didn't really get a lot of Oscar nominations. This is a classic movie. Anyway,
Josh, I was elected to lead, not to read.
All-time line. That's such an all-timer line. That's Trump personified. Anyway, all right. So we got Frost Nixon for Corwin. We got 8.5 for me. The Foreign Film Fest continues next week. If you want to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at JuicingPod. If you want to hit us up via email, you can do so at juicingthenumbers@gmail.com. And until Monday, y'all have a good one.
Bye.